Avatar: Fire and Ash is the third and latest installment in James Cameron's Avatar franchise. Jake Sully, Neytiri, and their family, still grieving over the loss of their eldest son, must face a new threat: the Ash People, a violent and power-hungry Na'vi tribe led by the ruthless Varang. The RDA is of course an ever-looming threat, and combined with the Ash, this film is very conflict-heavy. Fire and Ash is basically exactly what I've come to expect from the Avatar franchise. The CGI is of course stunning, but it does continue to lack the much-needed depth that keeps this franchise from becoming something more than just a visual feast. But it's also not like I went into this expecting to be blown away. I just wanted to be entertained, and I was. That makes some of these issues less relevant, even if they do still impact my experience with the film. And to be honest, I really don't have much to say about the positives for this. It's kind of all the same as the previous ones. Again, like I've said, it's good CGI, you get this huge sense of scale, you have entertaining battles, all of that is here. I do think Fire and Ash also comes with an inherent disadvantage compared to the previous two films. The first Avatar's CGI was obviously extremely impressive for the time, and The Way of Water was a huge technical leap as well. With Fire and Ash, you don't get that because it's only been a few years since the previous installment. It's not like this is really much of an issue, it's to be expected, and I think expecting another leap would be very unrealistic, but it does still take away some of the wow factor that I think the first two had. When a huge part of this franchise appeal is the technical aspects, it does somewhat take away from the experience, at least for me. It creates a feeling of sameness throughout the film, which unfortunately this feeling does come from more than just the visuals. The sameness is the biggest detriment to Fire and Ash. In terms of its set pieces and story beats, it repeats a lot of what came before, especially with The Way of Water. Much of the climactic battle of this film takes place in the water again, in what I'm pretty sure is the exact same location as the climactic battle in the previous film. And again, like the CGI, it's not like this is detrimental, but having such a huge portion of this film look so similar to the previous entry is kind of disappointing. With the first Avatar, a lot of the film of course took place in the forest, with these massive trees. And the second one moves us to a different part of Pandora, and because of this, they're visually distinct, which goes a long way in making them feel different from each other. There's also one story beat in the final battle that is nearly exactly the same as The Way of Water. I won't describe it in too much detail as to avoid spoilers, but essentially it's the same thing as when Spider has to be rescued in the second film. It's now just different characters that have been taken hostage. It's still entertaining, and it ends up leading to what might be my favorite action sequence in the film that actually also carries a solid amount of emotional weight, but I still just wish the film did something a little bit different. Even just the same situation where a character is taken as a hostage in a different location would have made it still feel fresher, but it's basically in the same location as The Way of Water, so again, there's this feeling of sameness in so much of the film. And even though the final battle is the standout in terms of this same location issue, that is present throughout a lot of the rest of the film too. It's not like we move to a completely different part of Pandora as we do between the first and second films. I'm also not sure that this film really justifies its super long runtime. As an overall product, I would actually say that this film is paced pretty well, feeling quite a bit shorter than it actually is, even if there are still some individual scenes that felt kind of dragged out. The main reason I think the runtime isn't justified is more so because I think there could have been a lot more done with how much time we spend in this world. For such a long film, character development feels pretty lacking. It's certainly there to an extent, but it was never enough for me to have ever become super invested in any of the storylines. I'm also just not sure how much this film really adds to the franchise in general. It feels like besides a few notable developments, we're left in largely the same place as we were with The Way of Water. It doesn't expand the world nearly as much as the previous two entries. Obviously, the first film introduced us to Pandora and the Na'vi people, but the second also still really expanded on that. We finally meet a new tribe tribe of Na'vi. We meet Jake and Neytiri's children. We move to a different part of the planet. All of these things make the second film feel worthwhile because we get so much new stuff. At least with Fire and Ash, we do meet another new group of Na'vi, but honestly, that's kind of it. There's nothing else of major note that we are introduced to. I also just can't shake the feeling that there's no reason that this and The Way of Water could not have been one 3.5-hour film rather than two, which I believe was James Cameron's original intention before he realized he had written way too much to just be a single movie. This new Na'vi tribe are a pretty threatening presence throughout the course of the film. Their leader is often intimidating, but honestly, being a threat is kind of all these guys are. All of the characterization for them just basically comes down to being generic, I guess, savages, which is just not all that interesting to me. Like, you have 3.5 hours to tell this story, and the primary villains of it feel so extremely one-dimensional. And it's not like I needed an all-time great film villain, but I still think we should have gotten something a little bit more. It's just really disappointing, honestly. In general, I felt a lot of the writing felt lazy. There's one moment pretty early into the film, which features a very important development for Spider, but the way it happens feels extremely cheap. It feels like they just could not think of an actually good way for this event to happen, but it needed to for the story to progress. It's one of those things that's almost kind of shocking to me that it actually made it into the final film. It feels like the kind of thing that would have been like a placeholder scene in a first draft that would be rewritten and expanded on later so that it actually makes some amount of sense. It is partially redeemed by having some of what happens here explained in more detail later on, but it still left a sour taste in my mouth. One of the advantages that this film does have over The Way of Water specifically is that it at least doesn't feel as repetitive to me. Of course, as I've already said, there are story beats repeated between the two films, but if you look at them as standalone stories, there wasn't much throughout Fire and Ash that I found to be redundant, which was not at all the case with The Way of Water. One of my biggest issues with that film was how Jake and Neytiri's children were developed, specifically with, I think it was Loak, their second oldest son, who often found himself getting into trouble. This created conflict and an opportunity for his character to develop, and that opportunity was used. The issue with this is how many times it's established. I remember there being something like 3, maybe even 4 different instances of him getting himself into trouble, and just one time would have been enough for the exact same character arc. Honestly, like, I think a good 30 minutes probably could have been shaved off of the movie, and it would have been better for it. Ultimately, I think both The Way of Water and Fire and Ash have different sets of flaws and a lot of the same strengths, and that leaves me feeling about the same for both of them. This review has been a lot more focused on the negatives, obviously, but I do want to reiterate that I don't think this is a bad film. It does have a lot of flaws, but purely looking at it as a piece of entertainment, I do think it succeeds well enough to still be an overall positive experience. If you enjoyed the previous 2 Avatar films for their visual prowess and spectacle, this is probably another one that you'll enjoy. I just think it's important to manage your expectations going into it. It's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. Thanks so much for watching, and if you'd like more film reviews like this one, please subscribe.